Well, you're getting it here first. Good morning. Happy Monday. It's great to have you here on KCMO Talk Radio. You are here at 6:05 on a Monday morning, and I hope that you are moments away from being glad that you maybe got up earlier. I teased this on social media, that we are going to share something with you that I think is potentially going to be big political news here in the Kansas City region. Now, you all know that there is a governor's race coming up in Kansas next year, right? I know some of you are counting down. If you're someone who's not a fan of Laura Kelly, you got the old countdown going. You might have one of those countdown clocks in your house somewhere, like they do for the Super Bowl, coming up in 6 days, 18 hours, and 27 minutes.
Well, in honor of the fact that she was a teacher, I've glued together strips of paper in a loop, and I tear off one of the loops every day.
Good for you, John.
Make the chain a little
Good.
shorter.
She would be so proud of you, man.
Symbolic.
Well, I can sit here and tell you, and you are hearing it first here on 95.7 FM KCMO Talk Radio, that former Royals general manager and team president Dayton Moore is traveling the state of Kansas and will be traveling the state of Kansas as he considers the possibility of leading Kansans in a different manner. Obviously, he led a baseball team here very successfully for many, many years. He's now a special advisor for the Texas Rangers, working for his good friend and former Royal, Chris Young. And that job is still very much intact. I can tell you, having spoken to him, I mean, he was in the Dominican recently. He's signing players. Like, he's doing his job for the Texas Rangers. But he is going to spend some time traveling the state of Kansas and explore what a next phase of his leadership life might look like. And obviously, people are naturally circling and looking at the governor's race coming up in 2026. Now, knowing the guy as I do, I would call him a friend for the last several years now. This is not a shock to me. This is somebody who is passionate about his home state, who wants to see the state stop being mediocre. Even, and that's really a nonpartisan issue, right? Kansas has not seen population growth outside of Johnson County. It has not really seen robust job growth outside of Johnson County. It's kind of like floundering along, and we talk all the time about ways this state can do a better job and ways it can improve and ways it can be a destination. I mean, every state has its pros and cons. How you maximize your pros is how you become a great state and how you become one of the most desirable states in the country. And anyone who considers themselves a Kansan, whether born and bred or a transplant, loves the state for everything that it offers, but I don't think anybody would sit here and tell you Kansas is maximizing its potential. It's not. So I've had those conversations as a friend with Dayton over the years. He has always been very interested in politics. He's picked my brain on that over the years, and I've been able to pick his brain on a lot of different things, from leadership to fatherhood, just things that we have talked about over the years. And I've spent obviously a lot of time around politicians, and I don't know what Dayton Moore is going to do. I mean, this is just something that's kind of potentially happening. He's looking at the possibility, whether it's governor or maybe something else, right? I mean, there's a bunch of things that he could do in the political arena. But I deal with politicians all the time, not just on the show, but meet with them and visit with them. And the vast majority, I'm not going to say all, but the vast majority have the depth of my children's kiddie pool in the backyard. That is not Dayton Moore. This is somebody who, if he does do something like this, will do it for all the right reasons. Not because he's looking for some kind of fame on the back end. I mean, he's got that more than the vast majority of politicians do in this state, right? If you were to go around the state of Kansas and ask them if they know Dayton Moore or the, Speaker of the House or the Senate President or anybody else, who do you think they're knowing? So it's not a chase for any kind of fame or glory. he's always been extremely passionate about leading people and just the idea of leadership and what it looks like. And putting that to the test in the political arena is something that I'm sure he has given thought to. We've talked about it on very minor levels before over the years, not to this extent, but we've had those conversations. And now, with this news coming out that you're hearing first on 95.7 FM KCMO Talk Radio, I can't sit here and say I'm all that surprised by it. Now, once again, there's no guarantee on what he's going to do. He's going to be talking to people around the state. You know, he spent some time at Garden City Community College back in the day, so he's got ties out to that part of Kansas as well. But from a pure political perspective, it makes sense. Why has Kansas lost, or why have Kansas Republicans, I should say, lost the last two governors' races to Laura Kelly? Well, they got creamed in Johnson County both times. Derek Schmidt lost Johnson County by 20-some-odd points. It was like 21 or something like that. You can't possibly make up ground around the state when a fifth of your population is right here and expect to win. Even though it was close, and, you know, you can blame Gomer Pyle, a.k.a. Dennis Pyle, all you want. It doesn't matter. The guy lost. It's not horseshoes. And I remember sitting here ripping my hair out saying, is anyone going to tell Derek Schmidt that Johnson County exists? Like, you just can't lose this place by 20 points and expect to make it up. It's not going to happen. Of all the Republicans that are potentially going to get into this race, if Dayton Moore were to get into the race, well, guess what? His strength is the Kansas Republican Party's weakness. Not that I think he would win Johnson County, but you tell me who's going to keep a closer gap in Johnson County for the Kansas GOP than the former Royals general manager who won a World Series, who got the two straight, who was here for going on, a couple decades. Not many people who still has a footprint in the community with a See You in the Major Leagues Foundation. What other general managers or former general managers have maintained relationships in the communities that they lived in and worked in with an organization like See You in the Major Leagues, which we've talked to Dayton about on this show? None of them come to mind for me, and I admit I don't know all 30 of them, but none of them come to mind for me. So you've already got that bedrock and that connection. I mean, this is still home for him. Dayton Moore is still a Kansan. So if this is something he ends up doing, I think it's a potentially incredible benefit to the state, to the Kansas GOP, that right now only has one official candidate in it, and that is Scott Schwab, the Secretary of State. But trust me, there's more to come in the weeks and months ahead. But right away, you got someone who is a serious contender, who is an outsider, if he does do it, who is truly a leader of people, not just somebody who's looking to work up the political ladder, get his political stripes, not looking to, just shake hands down at Mar-a-Lago. This is a very serious person with incredible depth, who, for all the people I deal with in my life, I consider to be a friend, and I consider to be somebody who I have learned a lot from on fatherhood and leadership over the years. And that is something that I think Kansans may be learning more about before long. But once again, nothing is set in stone. I can just sit here and tell you as we kick it off on a Monday morning that former Royals general manager and team president Dayton Moore is going to be traveling the state, is going to be exploring the possibility of some type of political run, and all eyes are obviously going to be looking at that governor's race in 2026. 913-408-7957. That's our text line. That is our studio line here on KCMO Talk Radio. I didn't want to throw this news right at you right out of the gates on a Monday. Some of you are like, whoa, this is too much for 6:05 on a Monday. It's never too much. But I also wanted to make sure you got it here first, because that's why you come to us every weekday morning, 6 to 10 on KCMO. 913-408-7957. We will get to you. We'll get to that feedback, that reaction out of the gates. And plus, yes, the Trump tariffs go into effect. It's all happening What does it mean? What is the response? We'll get to it on 95.7 FM. Well, we just shared the news with you to start the show that former Royals general manager and team president Dayton Moore is at least exploring the idea of a possible run for governor of Kansas that would come as a Republican if he does end up pulling the trigger on this. It is a KCMO Talk Radio exclusive, and we'll talk more about it throughout the morning here on 95.7 FM. But speaking of sports, did you see those sorry SOBs up to our north, eh?
Boo, eh?
Eh?
Boo, eh?
Yeah, that's right. Those dopes up in Canada are booing our national anthem. I'm not going to stand for it.
How dare you?
We're not going to sit here and allow those Canadians to boo our great Star-Spangled Banner. Well, that is what happened over the weekend at a hockey game and an NBA game because they are upset that, well, Daddy's home.
Such a nice man.
No, don't you dare. That was at the Ottawa Senators game over the weekend. And then you had this from the Raptors game. Here we go in Toronto.
8-year-old Kyra Daniel.
All right, I'm not going to listen to these sorry saps boo our anthem up there, okay? I'm not going to listen to it anymore. I'm done with it, and we're going to cut that audio off when I tell Mark to cut the audio off. But they are obviously upset because of tariffs, 25% tariffs that are coming to Canadian and Mexican imports, and China's getting hit with another 10%. That was the news that, of course, we knew was coming and came out over the weekend. Now, do I sit here and inherently like tariffs? No. I mean, as someone who believes in the idea of just free trade, I don't like it. That being said, I voted for Donald Trump, and I voted knowing full well he loves himself some tariffs, right? He uses tariffs as a negotiating ploy, I believe, in large part. And he planned on doing this. He announced he was going to do this. And he talked about doing this for months on end leading up to the November 5th election. So I can't sit here and act outraged by it because I knew it was coming, even though it wasn't my favorite part of his platform, John.
I get it not being a favorite, and at the same time not understanding that why are we paying a tariff? Because we're buying something from China. Mm-hmm. Because we don't make it here.
Yeah.
And so I go to the red, white, and blue, and I maybe jump down the road. But I'm not as frustrated. I'm more aggravated that we don't do it here and why we even have to deal with it.
Well, exactly. And that is a fair point to bring up. We have become, obviously, a global economy. And this is part of, for better or for worse, what you deal with when you have a global economy. And that is that there are going to be times when you ruffle the feathers of the Canadians and you say, you know what, if you want to bring good A, B, or C into the U.S., it's going to cost you. Now, in the end, what likely ends up happening, that cost gets passed on to the customer. That's you and I, who consume whatever these goods are from Canada or Mexico or China. But here's what I find interesting. The CEO of the second largest company in Canada has come out in defense of Donald Trump's tariffs on Canada. This guy's name is Toby Lutke. He's the CEO of Shopify. You may know Shopify, major publicly traded company. And the article goes on the note here. In a quote from Toby Lutke, who co-founded Shopify, he wrote, "Canada thrives when it works with America together. Win by helping America win. Trump believes that Canada has not held its side of the bargain. These are things that every Canadian wants its government to do too. these are not crazy demands, even if they came from an unpopular source. These tariffs are going to be devastating to so many people's lives and small businesses. Lutke's worth an estimated $10 billion and one of Canada's richest people. He said leadership is about doing what's right, not what is popular, and hitting back will not lead to anything good. America will shrug it off. Canada will decline. It's simply the wrong choice in a possibility space where much better options would have been available. So he's basically saying to Justin Trudeau, hey, don't hit back with your own tariffs, my man. Be very careful what you wish for. And that's been Donald Trump's approach to these things. His approach is these countries all need us, in the long term especially, more than we need them. And Trump admitted when he spoke last night to reporters when he returned to Washington, D.C., that, yes, there may be some short-term tariff pain.
We may have short-term some little pain, and people understand that. But long-term, the United States has been ripped off by virtually every country in the world. We have deficits with almost every country. Not every country, but almost. And we're going to change it. It's been unfair. That's why we owe $36 trillion. We have deficits with everybody. We help everybody. We've been helping everybody for years. And to be honest, I don't think they appreciate it. So we're going to change that. We're going to change it fast. We're going to make America great again. We have to focus on our country. We have tremendous potential if properly used, and we have to focus on our country. Tremendous deficits with China, tremendous deficits with the European Union, tremendous deficits with Mexico and Canada.
Now, I don't believe inherently deficits are a bad thing because, well, we've got more people, way more people than Mexico and Canada. So us consuming more of their stuff just by the numbers makes way more sense than them consuming more of our stuff. But the broader question that I think John alluded to and that many Americans are going to agree with is this idea that we have outsourced a lot of things to other countries. And we have allowed them to then make things that we consume here in the U.S. Now, if they make them here in the U.S., no doubt it's going to be more expensive. The thing that hasn't really been tried in economic policy in a long time is what does that do to our economy if you bring some of that manufacturing and some of those businesses to the United States? Do we have the labor force for some of these industries? Does it make sense for some of these industries to operate out of the United States? There's a lot of questions that still need to be answered. I do believe a large part of this for Donald Trump is negotiating, but I also think he's in a situation where he looks at it, he says, I'm more popular than I've ever been. I just won the popular vote. My approval rating is higher than it's ever been. I've got some political capital to play with, and he's playing with it right now. And we'll see how long he wants to drag this thing on. 913-4087-957. We've got the 6 at 6 coming up on KCMO, and also some feedback on this news from one of our local senators. I just like watching MSNBC in a morning like this. Suddenly they're concerned about the price of everyday goods for Americans. I find that awfully comical as well. I mean, for 4 years it was like, this inflation's just transitory. Joe's doing a great job. Oh, don't you love it, John?
I saw Schumer stand there tapping his wallet, talking about prices. I'm like, you haven't done anything to clean up your mess, is the implication there.
That's a great tease. I've got a great Chuck Schumer clip I'm going to play. I was grilling burgers last night thinking about Chuck. Unlike him, I didn't put the cheese on before the burger was grilled. But I was thinking about that two-bit huckster last night. But with that, these tariffs are obviously coming to be. You got Canada, you've got Mexico getting hit with 25% each. China's getting another 10%. Here was Eric Schmidt, Missouri U.S. Senator, yesterday on Meet the Press.
It's growing, and when they have a porous border and they don't seem very concerned at all, and by the way, I heard the clip earlier, Justin Trudeau sort of lecturing Americans. My advice to him is he probably ought to talk to the Canadian people who are about ready to throw him out of office because he's been a total disaster. So I think we've got a president that wants to put America first and protect people. We have 100,000 people a year Kristen, dying from fentanyl. He ran on this. This is not a surprise. He talked about getting operational control of our border. He talked about tariffs and improving our standing in the world. He's doing all those things. And look no further. The best evidence of this was last week. Colombia came to the table after that threat and agreed to take criminals back into their country and illegal immigrants. So the fact of the matter is it works. It worked the first time when he was in office. We didn't see inflation. We saw wage growth, and we saw more onshoring of jobs back here to the United States.
That was Missouri U.S. Senator Eric Schmidt, one of our own, yesterday on Meet the Press. So that's Eric Schmidt alluding to the fact that this is largely negotiating and art of the deal, whatever you want to call it. This is all stuff that Donald Trump has used before. He feels more emboldened to use it because of how much he won by on November 5th, the fact that he does have more political capital than he's ever had. There is some risk here. There's no doubt about it. There is some risk here to all this, right? But you know, I see and I agree with a lot of the stuff that gets written in the Wall Street Journal editorial pages. But I will say sometimes I look at what they write, in this case in particular, and I'm like, okay, guys, this is not going to connect with the average Kansan or the average Missourian like you think it is. The Wall Street Journal writes here in a headline called "The Dumbest Trade War in History," quote, "Take the U.S. auto industry, which is really a North American industry because supply chains in the three countries are highly integrated." They go on to say, in 2024, Canada supplied almost 13% of U.S. imports of auto parts, Mexico nearly 42%. Industry experts say a vehicle made on the continent goes back and forth across the borders a half dozen times or more, as companies source components and add value in the most cost-effective way, and everyone benefits. Have you gone out and looked for a new car lately? You got to get a second mortgage on these things, for crying out loud. Now, maybe you can say, hey, it could always be worse. Be careful what you wish for. I understand that. But alluding to the car industry, which we all understand, NAFTA, parts come from Mexico, parts come from Canada. I mean, all that's true. There's no doubt about it. But using that industry right now, when Americans are driving older cars than they've ever driven, I mean, the average car on the road now is like 13 years old because people are looking at new cars and they're saying, you know, that's like a second mortgage. That is not in the cards right now. They're looking at that and they're saying, I just can't get there. And the Wall Street Journal editorial board is like, yeah, well, the reason that we shouldn't have tariffs is because it keeps our car prices low. What? No one's feeling that way right now. You got to at least have a better example than that, for crying out loud. Sarah's in Raymore. Hi, Sarah. You're on KCMO. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much for everything you do every day. I really enjoy your show. I was calling because I work for a shipping company, and my job is one where I'm a subject matter expert on a certain mode of shipping. And I work with the largest companies in the country. And I sit in regularly, sometimes 3, 4, 5 times a day in different quarterly business reviews with these large customers. And, you know, one of the biggest lanes that they ship on is outbound California from the border, outbound Texas from the border, because they're bringing things across. And I've never, ever heard in all of these quarterly business reviews them talk about Mexico and Canada in a way where they were talking about moving their plants and their businesses back to the United States. Never. And the last month, it is a constant discussion about what is Trump going to do? Should we move it back? They're asking us to do center of gravity studies where they're saying, okay, what would it cost if we moved from here to here? What would that shipping look like? I would highly suggest to any commercial realtors in this area to partner up with the commercial realtors at the border. They don't have enough warehouse space down there. They don't have enough plants down there. And these companies are looking at moving across. It is really an opportunity for our area, I think, with our centrally located position to take advantage of it. But it is going to be hard. But these companies, I'm telling you, they're making shifts. And it is happening. We just don't see it yet. the boardroom to reality is a lot. There's a lot of time in between. And so we've got to just kind of hang on as a country and watch these changes take forth. But it's happening.
How long have you been in this industry, Sarah?
21 years.
21 years. Is that right?
Yeah.
And
28, I guess, if you add my time, when I was doing dispatch and stuff in my early 20s. So, yeah, almost 30 years.
So almost 30 years you've been in this industry, and you're saying this is the first time you've seen them seriously consider moving a larger part of their operations back into the United States.
Yes, and this isn't just like your big car manufacturers. Everybody focuses on that. It is tile companies, pool companies, people that make, pools for your backyards, everything, plastics. There's so much business, especially in Mexico, more than Canada. But they are absolutely making those shifts and looking at them. The biggest struggle right now is they're looking at Texas and California for space. And, we all know what's going on in Southern California, so that's kind of out the window. And then you've got Texas, and they can only take so much. Mm-hmm. There's only so much warehouse space out there. So that's our thing. So commercial realtors really need to be looking at partnering with different commercial realtors in Texas.
You think that could benefit us in Kansas and Oklahoma, to your point?
Yes.
Okay, Kansas and Missouri. What am I talking about? Kansas. I'm looking at a map, and I said Oklahoma. Kansas and Missouri.
I think it could if the realtors work with each other. Yeah. And because those realtors in Texas don't have the space, and if they can work out a deal to say, hey, when these companies call you, send them our way, and we'll work out something in terms of commission, 100%. These companies they can't find the warehouse space right now. And so that is a big problem. And I'm sitting on these calls and I'm like, move to Kansas City.
Yeah.
And then, they don't even think about it until I mention it. And they're like, yeah, you guys are in a great spot where you guys are at. Our shipping costs are on the high side, believe it or not, for this area. But it's, something that's definitely on the table.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for sharing this, Sarah, and thanks for making the call.
All right. Thank you, Pete.
Excellent work there. That is, I think that's the front runner for caller of the day there, John. That's going to be tough to beat, my man.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of information in there.
We'll announce our caller of the day, as we do each and every morning at 9:30. And what do you get for being the caller of the day? Well, nothing. You get
personal satisfaction.
Yeah, exactly. You get to tell people at the water cooler when you
As
get to
Ralphie
work.
would say in Christmas Story, you get some benefits and honors.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness. Well, on these tariffs, Chuck Schumer, U.S. Senator from New York, did a little press conference on this yesterday. And Chuck, he continues to show how out of touch he is. Here we go.
Let's just take Super Bowl Sunday.
Oh, yeah.
Okay?
Average guy. Super Bowl Sunday.
It's going to affect beer. Okay? Most of it, Corona here, comes from Mexico. It's going to affect your guac. Because what is guacamole made of? Avocados, both from Mexico.
Thank you for that little lesson there, Chuck. I had no idea. You don't drink Corona at a Super Bowl party, okay?
What's he got against Modelo?
Yeah. Oh, he could never go that low, Chuck Schumer standing there with a can of Corona beer and an avocado saying, this guy Trump's coming for your Super Bowl parties. Chuck, you can't have a Corona at a Super Bowl party. You just can't do it, my man. Coronas are only acceptable at the pool or at the beach. That's it. You cannot be sitting there cheering on the Chiefs this weekend drinking a Corona. You lose all credibility.
You got to get a Arrow Red Lager from KC Beer Co.
There you go. Keep it local.
I don't want any guac from Chuck. He probably mashes the husk right into it. Yeah. You're going to grind this thing down.
Yeah. Oh, this is harder than it looks. I wonder why there, buddy. Got to peel it first, chump. So that was Chuck Schumer trying to be everyman, saying your Super Bowl party's getting more expensive thanks to Trump. Can you help me interpret what Mayor Lucas is saying in this clip? Because I can't figure it out. And I talk to the guy every Thursday morning at 7:30 here on KCMO Talk Radio. And I don't know what the mayor of Kansas City is trying to say in this clip. He was talking to the media over the weekend about how there's not going to be a traditional rally in Kansas City if the Chiefs end up winning the Super Bowl coming up on Sunday over the Eagles. And what they're going to do instead of the rally that ends at Union Station, there will still be a parade, but instead of a rally ending at Union Station going from north to south down Grand Boulevard, what they'll do instead is they'll go south to north, start somewhere around Crown Center, go up Grand, end up around River Market, and then probably just have the buses hop on I-70 and go back to Arrowhead. There will be a little event beforehand at Arrowhead for friends, family, and dignitaries, as they call themselves, i.e. the political chumps get to be a part of this as well for a reason no one quite understands. They did nothing to make this happen, but since they're credited with using our tax dollars to help out the teams, they get to go. Must be nice. With that, here was Mayor Lucas over the weekend talking to the media about why there's not going to be a rally and talking about what it looks like for Kansas City going forward.
We always work in advance to see what are ways we can enhance it. To the question before, how do we make sure that we can be as safe as possible? I think the city has very much recognized, like we do with any of them, right? We have had incidents in our city in the past, and we always try to make sure that we figure out how we can make it so that everybody's as safe as possible. We will continue to have celebrations in Kansas City. Big cities do big things. And we think that a Chiefs win is something that is big in that regard.
Big cities do big things with the caveat, not as big as they used to be.
Except when they don't.
Except Kansas City does big things, but they used to be bigger. How about that for the tagline? I understand he's in a tough spot here because this does not make the city look good. But here's what I am very curious to, and I will ask him about this week when he's on the show on Thursday. How much of this was really the city versus how much of this was the Chiefs saying, we're not doing this again? I know that Kevin Keatsman had this thought last week when this news came down, and the thought was, and listen, Kevin's coming up at 10 o'clock, of course. He does a great job. His thought was more along the lines of basically, the Hunt family doesn't want to do this anymore. They were embarrassed by their players last year. Obviously, the shooting was a tragedy, and he's right about that, and the Chiefs are right to feel that way. Because the players did embarrass themselves last year. Travis Kelce couldn't walk upright when he's trying to sing Friends in Low Places. He's slurring his words. I mean, that's a guy you'd be dragging out of the bar if he was your buddy. You'd say, dude, we're done here. You got to go home. And it was like noon on a Wednesday, and he was embarrassing himself. Willie Gay's got a bottle to his face lying on Grand Boulevard. It was really, really embarrassing. So I get the Chiefs saying, listen, we're not doing this anymore. And I think Kevin is right when he notes that the Chiefs were the drivers behind all this. But I do wonder how much the city is to blame, where the Chiefs also thought to themselves, we don't trust the city to do what needs to be done to put on a rally of this magnitude and to keep everybody safe. So there's a two-parter here. The Chiefs saying last year did not make us look good as a franchise, and it also didn't make the city look good. But this year, is it more about the Chiefs saying we don't want to look like that again? Or is it about them saying we don't trust the city to make sure that they can keep people safe during a Super Bowl rally where you've got hundreds of thousands of people showing up, John?
No other city has funded 3 Super Bowl celebrations in a row, so how much does that cost?
Yes.
You know, when you get down to it.
There's a pretty penny attached to that as well. You're absolutely right. And that's where I just wonder, and I don't blame the men and women in law enforcement. I mean, heck, you've got cops all over the metro. There were 800, 900 cops down there last year. How many more can you have, right? Like, you literally can't get more than you had down there last year. And if the city didn't feel like it could either fund having some type of NFL draft setup like we had a couple of years ago, where you've got checkpoints around the World War I memorial, you've got people going through those, and you're setting up what you know will be a safe environment, then the team may say, if you're not willing to do X, Y, and Z, we're not going to have the rally. And that's where the city may come back and say, fine, guys, we can't give you what you need to feel like this thing is going to be as safe as possible, so let's just shut the whole thing down. And the worst part, from my perspective, is that they're still going to get theirs. The politicians are not incentivized to put on a rally for you because they're going to be at Arrowhead anyway. They're going to be at Arrowhead Stadium if the Chiefs win a week from Wednesday for this little event with friends and family and dignitaries. And by the way, Missouri politicians, they're also going to be lobbying to be there as well. Trust me, Jackson County politicians, Kansas City, Missouri politicians, maybe some Kansas folks too. They're all going to be lobbying to be there. They're still going to be a part of it. And in fact, it works out better for them because it's a smaller crowd for them to hobnob. Instead of being outside a Union Station with, a couple 100,000 people. So nobody was incentivized to put on a rally for you. No one was looking out for the average fan here, and that's what annoys me.
I wonder how the stadium surveys are turning now.
Yes, ain't that the truth, my man? Ain't that the truth? But first, they got to win the game on Sunday, or it's all a moot point. Well, there may be a big name and new face to keep an eye on in the Kansas political scene as we get it rolling on a Monday morning on KCMO Talk Radio. As we reported first at 6:05 here on 95.7 FM, former Royals general manager and team president Dayton Moore is set to travel the state of Kansas and is exploring the possibility of a statewide run for governor. That is being considered. Now, this is somebody who right now is a special advisor to the Texas Rangers, working for former Royal and good friend Chris Young. But if you know Dayton, and I'm honored to call him a friend at this point, this is somebody who has always been passionate about leadership, not just when it comes to baseball, but frankly more so in life. Heck, there are times when he got some flack for trying to lead young men here in Kansas City with the Royals. Some of the woke nonsense that people tried to go after him for. That was nothing but a guy looking at the world and saying, we've got problems here, and I want to make sure that young men are on the right trajectory when they come in here in a very complicated world and play for the Kansas City Royals. And he did it very well. He obviously got the 2 World Series. He led this team to 1 World Series. And he's always somebody, I can tell you, who has been interested in our local political scene. So I share all this with you this morning to say it's something to definitely keep an eye on. It's not a slam dunk. It's not necessarily happening. But I know that conversations around the state are ongoing. And there's certainly interest in something that has Dayton Moore involved in the Kansas political scene. The obvious one to look at is the governor's race coming up in 2026. But I wouldn't rule anything out at this point. There could be something else that may be more appealing or maybe a first step, whatever you want to call it. Johnson County is still home for Dayton Moore. Heck, he was on this show a few weeks ago talking about his See You in the Major Leagues Foundation. I mean, how many former GMs and team presidents, and not just Major League Baseball, but any sport, develop a foundation in the city that they work in and then keep that going even when they've moved on to work somewhere else? And that's because it wasn't just about headlines and looking like a good guy by having a foundation to help the kids. It's actually about helping the kids. I know it's a novel concept for some people, but that's what it's always been about for them. And this is somebody who has always looked to lead, whether it's young men when it comes to baseball, but just people in general when it comes to running an organization, right? When you're talking about running an organization like the Royals, it's not just about going out there and picking the best players or telling the manager what to do. I mean, there's a lot more to it. It's like running a major corporation. You're dealing with dozens and dozens of employees. You're dealing with real-life situations that have nothing to do with baseball. And that's where I think someone like Dayton Moore would be an asset to any company, any baseball team, in any state where he wanted to use his leadership talents to improve them. Because let's be honest, Kansas has been mired in mediocrity for far too long. And that's not a shot at Laura Kelly, who's the current governor. I mean, she's won twice. She's beaten Republicans. Republicans don't know how to beat her. I'll get to that in a second. But more importantly, Kansas has been mired in mediocrity. We're losing population. The only growth this state is seeing is Johnson County. Everywhere else is just trying to hold on to what it's got. And that's not unique to Kansas. I know in many parts of rural America, there are obvious issues that these parts of the country face that are resulting in them losing population. But still, Kansas as a whole has been kind of stuck in the mud for a long time. Despite having a great geographical advantage that it seems like it's never fully taken advantage of. Can you get the right kind of leadership, the right kind of person to the table to say Kansas is done being mediocre? It can be great. It's time for it to be great. And here's how we make it great. You need the right people. You can't have another, politician looking to kind of ease his or her way up the political ladder and, shaking all the right hands and doing all the right things. I say that in air quotes, doing all the right things. This is something that would certainly shake up the race. And right now, the Kansas gubernatorial race only includes Scott Schwab, the current Secretary of State, but will undoubtedly include many others. And many others who have deep political ties around the state of Kansas, as either people who have been in office or are currently in office. And the question is, if you're a Kansas resident right now, do you want that? And it's fine if you do, and I'm not telling you what you should want, because no one really knows if Dayton Moore is going to do it. All I'm saying is he's going to travel the state, he's going to talk to business leaders, community leaders, political leaders, and kind of get a sense for what's what and whether or not this is something that he ultimately wants to do. But is this what you would want as a Kansan? 913-408-7957. Is this something that you would be interested in as a Kansan? The possibility of someone like Dayton Moore, who still calls Johnson County home and obviously is a born and bred Kansan, spent time at Garden City Community College. I mean, this is his home beyond baseball. Is this someone where you say, you know what, I like the sound of that? Or do you say, no, we've got political leaders in this state who, can get the job done, and we've just got to move on from Laura Kelly? Well, remember, what Laura Kelly did very well is run up the score twice right here in Johnson County. That's how a Democrat has to win statewide. They've got to run up the score in Johnson County, just like 4 years ago. When what happened? Derek Schmidt lost Johnson County by 20 points. You can't lose Johnson County by 20 points. You can't give it up. It's a fifth-year population and growing. You can't just say, forget Johnson County. We'll try to run it up in, Dodge City and Garden City and Coldwater and Meade and all these places that, I used to be at calling high school football games when I worked down in Northwest Oklahoma. The math doesn't work, right? I'm not saying you got to win Johnson County, but when you look at some of the names out there, Dayton Moore is somebody who at least closes the gap for you based on name alone in a place like Johnson County. So from a political perspective, there's certainly massive opportunity here. And I'll tell you right now, as someone who would call Dayton a friend, there are not many people when it comes to those who are genuine, who want to lead, who want to share their insights with you, whether it's someone like me as a friend or just anybody who really cares and has that kind of passion for leadership like Dayton Moore does. There are not many people built like that. I mean, I've learned parts of how to be a father, how to be a leader, how to be a man, just a lot of those things that he will share with you in conversation. And I've shared with him over the years, political stuff that he's been curious in. This is nothing new. I mean, the guy's been interested in the political world for a long time. And we won't find out tomorrow or next week whether or not he does anything with this. It will take some time to figure out what exactly this looks like for him if something does end up happening. I don't know either way. I don't know if he knows either way. But it is something that is being looked at. And for now, I mean, the guy is still employed by the Texas Rangers, right? He's still a special advisor down there. I can tell you he was down in the Dominican in the last couple of weeks, like looking at players, signing players. So he's still doing that job. But I do know this is something that is getting a legitimate consideration. And we will see how it plays out in the weeks and months ahead. It would definitely shake up the Kansas political scene for certain. 913-408-7957. That's our studio line and our text line here on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM. We're always streaming, of course, on the KCMO Talk Radio app. As we hit 8:15, the text line, Pete, not only yes, but hell yes. Okay, all right. We got some excited people on the text line about that possibility. Hey, just keep an eye on it. And you know that we'll update you. We broke the story this morning here on KCMO Talk Radio, and we'll have you covered on this one. And as we will most political stories in the region on 95.7 FM. And as always, streaming on the KCMO Talk Radio app. Coming up, I've been thinking about the best way to approach this. We are set for a week that is going to be very weird here in Kansas City. And I'll explain why you should not be bothered by that coming up on KCMO. Like it or not, you're about to be hated this week. Yeah, I mean, like all of us are about to be hated this week. Kansas City is going to be in a very weird place where it's going to be dealing with, for the next 6 days and potentially longer if they win the Super Bowl on Sunday, in a place of being the hated team in the hated city in the NFL, in America's most popular sport. And that's not a place that a city like Kansas City is ever used to being. Philadelphia's used to being there. They kind of embrace being there. They secretly like it. Boston, even with the Patriots, they didn't mind it. It's Boston. They love it. You call them and you say, hey, we can't stand you guys. We can't stand the Patriots. They put on that god-awful accent and they flip you 2 middle fingers. And then they give you some Dunkin' Donuts maybe. That's what they do up there, okay? That's how it goes. Kansas City, we're not kind of used to that whole thing, John. And that's what's going to make this week very different and very unique for us in Kansas City. And I think we've got to just embrace it in our own Kansas City way. That's what's got to happen here over the next 6 days because it's coming in hot and heavy.
Oh, yeah, haters going to hate.
Yeah, as Taylor Swift famously said. So the Associated Press had this big article that got published all over the country. That's how it works with the AP. They put out story, and then because there are no newspapers anywhere in America anymore, I mean, heck, Kansas City barely has a newspaper of substance, everyone picks up the article. And the article read, once the plucky underdog, the Kansas City Chiefs have become the NFL juggernaut fans love to hate. Starts off here, the Chiefs were once the lovable NFL underdogs, led by the good-natured coach who couldn't win the big one, the plucky quarterback with the Kermit the Frog-like voice, and the superstar tight end with charisma to spare. 5 years after their first trip to the Super Bowl in 5 decades, though, things have changed. As the Chiefs prepare to face the Eagles on Sunday with an opportunity to win their record 3rd consecutive Lombardi trophy, football fans are seeing Andy Reid's bushy mustache popping up on TV commercials. They hear Patrick Mahomes' voice seemingly everywhere. And Travis Kelce, he's only dating the biggest pop star on the planet. All of that and more has contributed to a profound sense of Chiefs fatigue that has turned many NFL fans against them. To me, what happened last season is what drove casual NFL fans over the edge against the Chiefs. It wasn't Taylor Swift in particular. It was them winning the Super Bowl in the wake of the Taylor Swift-Travis Kelce relationship. If they didn't win the Super Bowl last year, if they lost to the Bills in the divisional round, if they lost to the Ravens in the AFC Championship game, there would be Chiefs annoyance, but I don't believe there would be hatred. But you put all this together, and that is what has led to me to the hatred. I mean, go back 5 years when this team was trying to win that first Lombardi trophy in 50 years. Everybody, it felt like America was rooting for this team. They were behind Andy Reid getting the big one. They were behind the young quarterback who was slinging it all over the field. Kelce was, a big part of that. He wasn't what Travis Kelce is today, but he was a big part of that. But 5 years later, it's totally changed. And a lot of people point to Taylor Swift. I don't think it's just Taylor Swift.
No.
I think that she may have been part of the journey that led the Chiefs to being hated. But, the Taylor Swift stuff, it doesn't stack up because people always say, I'm so sick of seeing Taylor Swift on TV. Here are the numbers for you. Last year, the Super Bowl broadcast between the Chiefs and the 49ers was 4 hours and 8 minutes. Take a guess how much airtime Taylor Swift got, screen time she got in the 4 hours and 8 minutes of the Super Bowl broadcast last year.
Couldn't be more than 60 seconds, I'll bet.
54 seconds. Great guess.
That?
Nice guess there, John. Price is Right rules, you lose, but that's a very good guess. You got it within 6 seconds, my man. That's outstanding. 54 seconds of airtime for Taylor Swift last year in the Super Bowl. People make up the narrative about Taylor Swift that really is just an excuse to hate the Chiefs. It comes down to one thing and one thing only, and that is winning. That's it. Taylor Swift is just a convenient excuse to claim why they don't like this team in Kansas City.
Now, the judges give me the win because I said it couldn't be more than 60
that's true.
60 seconds.
Thank you.
So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good clarification on that. Nice job by you.
No, it's a timing thing. It's
yes.
over a period of a few years, a couple of years. You're like, yeah. Okay, now I'm tired of them. No, even if there was no Taylor, all this stuff, And by the way, I'm sick of seeing Gronkowski and Peyton Manning on commercials, so I'm not sure. Maybe I just kind of let the Patrick and Travis and Andy one slide. But
yes.
Still, I'm not sure if they've got most face time.
That's true.
Nonetheless, it does all, exacerbates that whole hating problem of the familiarity breeds contempt, we say in radio, relative to your favorite song. And, hey, let's play that song every 2 hours on the radio because everybody likes it. Pretty soon, the burnout starts to go.
And there is some of that going on, and that's fine. But I don't believe this team can ever stack up to the Patriots, who literally cheated. They literally cheated. And they had a head coach who was not Andy Reid, a head coach who is as boring as watching paint dry, and Bill Belichick. Andy Reid is as lovable a big, fat mustache guy as you could possibly have as a head coach. He makes fun of himself. He's easy to like. Outside of him winning and jealousy, what is there to not like about Andy Reid? You can't find it. And that's why when people say this team is the new Patriots, I genuinely don't understand it. And I'm trying to take off my Kansas City bias when I say that, but and try to analyze it from afar. But I do not see it. I don't. Travis Kelce, fine. You want to call him Mr. Pfizer? I can get on board with that. But I'll add this to the conversation as well. If you are someone who, politically speaking, leans to the right, and you're listening on our stream, on the Alexa, on the Google Home, on our app, and you have no horse in the race, the Kansas City Chiefs are as conservative an operation as you are going to find. The daughter of the owner puts a video up with a prayer verse before every game on her social media feed. The star quarterback's wife basically outed herself as a Donald Trump voter. The star quarterback's mother wears MAGA hats to Chiefs games. Taylor Swift is obviously a very prominent liberal, but she has not done any of that in and around Chiefs games or being around the team. She has kept her politics on the sidelines whenever she's around this team or has anything to do with this team. So that alone is reason enough to me for many traditional Americans to hopefully be jumping on this Chiefs bandwagon coming up on Sunday. We'll talk to John Marks, Philly Sports, in 20 minutes on KCMO Talk Radio. Coming up next, what is expected to go up when it comes to tariffs? Well, some politicians are really trying to scare you on this whole thing, and we'll talk about what it really means and what things will go up, or could. I probably should say could go up. Coming up on 95.7 FM, KCMO, and streaming on the KCMO Talk Radio app. 8:35, and the markets just opened up. They are down to start the day. Dow Jones off 400 points, NASDAQ off 356, and the S&P is off 87. So it's the NASDAQ taking the biggest hit right now, off about 2% to open up trading today. Dow's off 1%. S&P is off 1.5%. And this is because the markets are reacting to Donald Trump's tariffs on Mexico and Canada and also additional tariffs on China. Now, inherently, and we talked to Charlie Gasparino, Fox Business, about this last hour, I'm not sitting here like rah-rah tariffs. But as Charlie and I discussed last hour, this feels like it's largely part of a broader negotiation from Donald Trump. And if you're Donald Trump right now, you're sitting there and you're starting this second term, but it's kind of like a first term, but it's also like a second term because you can't run again. You have more political capital than you've ever had. You're more popular than you've ever been. Your approval ratings are sky high, higher than they ever were during your first term. And you admit, if you're Donald Trump, as he did last night, there might be some short-term pain, but it's part of a broader picture here.
All you Marxists out there who whine about a seat at the table, shut up and watch what happens. This is how it works. This is a seat at the table for you.
Here was Trump last night.
We may have short-term a little pain, and people understand that. But long-term, the United States has been ripped off by virtually every country in the world. We have deficits with almost every country. Not every country, but almost. And we're going to change it. It's been unfair. That's why we owe $36 trillion. We have deficits with everybody. We help everybody. We've been helping everybody for years. And to be honest, I don't think they appreciate it. So we're going to change that. We're going to change it fast. We're going to make America great again. We have to focus on our country. We have tremendous potential if properly used, and we have to focus on our country. Tremendous deficits with China, tremendous deficits with the European Union, tremendous deficits with Mexico and Canada.
That was Donald Trump last night on the tarmac when he got back to Washington, D.C., as these tariffs set to take effect tonight at midnight. And the markets are selling off. And watch what happens here. You will see the hate Trump media jump on the stock market game and say, oh, look at the Dow. Oh, my gosh, the Dow is off. The S&P is off. Remember, for the last 4 years, the markets rocketed under Joe Biden. The markets did great under Joe Biden. The American people said the economy's not good enough, and guess what? We're electing Donald Trump. If you think the stock market is the thing that is going to hurt Donald Trump, it's not. You have families losing loved ones due to drug poisonings and overdoses at record rates in this country. People who couldn't even fathom the idea of opening up a 401k. That's who put Donald Trump into the White House. In all 7 swing states. He won every one. He won the popular vote. And he ran on the idea of using tariffs to his advantage. Now, is it going to work? We'll see. I don't know. It wasn't my favorite part of his policy that he, ran on during the 2024 campaign. But it was one that I looked at and I said, well, you know what? I'm willing to give it a shot. I'm willing to see how it plays out because we are getting screwed left and right. And if this wakes up Mexico to do the job it's got to be doing in stopping the cartels from seemingly running their country and gets that government and their president down there to wake up a little bit and protect the American people, which is what they should be doing with their own borders, then you know what? A little tariff pain is going to go a long way and is going to be very beneficial long-term to the American people. That's what it feels like this is all about here. That's what it feels like the game is here that Trump is ultimately playing.
The whine is about the lack of instant gratification, right? Maybe you end up putting off a major purchase because of this, but it's not necessarily going to be all year, as Chuck Schumer would say, what it might cost a family of 4 over a year. This could be over in 90 days, 60 days,
could
30
be.
days.
Yeah, I mean, the sooner the better.
Absolutely.
The sooner Mexico realizes they're going to get hurt more than we are, and Trump isn't screwing around.
He's not pretending.
Yes. The better off everyone's going to be. Everyone is putting it on America. Everyone is putting it on Trump. Oh, come on. This might cause some pain. You know what? The last 4 years have been filled with pain. Talk to the 100,000 families, right, who have dealt with fentanyl poisonings in this country. We've got many here in the Kansas City area. Heck, there's a great 5K that we're involved with, the Cooper Davis Run. This young man over at Mill Valley who lost his life over a fentanyl poisoning. And we're going to be involved if they want to have us back again this year. I mean, and that's just one example of the hundreds of thousands of examples in this country when it comes to fentanyl poisonings in the United States, and it's flooding right across the Mexican border. And if Joe Biden did anything the last 4 years to even pretend like he cared about the issue, guess what? Trump probably wouldn't be in the White House today if they just pretended to care about the issue. So what are some of the categories where there could be increased costs? Could be is the key word here. Food is an obvious one. There are several key food categories. Mexico is the largest supplier of fruit and vegetables to the U.S. Canada leads exports of grain, livestock, and meats, poultry, and more. Certainly something to keep an eye on. Fuel and energy. U.S. imported $97 billion worth of oil and gas from Canada last year, the country's top export to the U.S. Now, here's what's interesting about that, right? If we do more of our own drilling in the United States, which Trump is trying to do, then maybe that becomes a moot point. If we're not importing $97 billion worth of oil and gas, then it doesn't really matter what the tariff is. That hurts Canada. If we reduce Canada's importing of oil and gas, well, that hurts Canada far more than a 25% tariff does, right? Let's think about that as well.
Stop being reasonable. You're looking at both sides of it now. Come on, there's a horror story out there to sell, Pete.
Yeah, I know. U.S. imported $87 billion worth more of motor vehicles and $64 billion worth of vehicle parts from Mexico last year. So, once again, yes, a tariff will increase the cost to the American consumer on that. But it's the Mexican economy that needs to continue to do business by importing these things to America. Like, they are going to potentially suffer far more than we are, and that's Trump's calculation in all this. But you could just boil it down to Chuck Schumer, the huckster senator from New York State, who went on TV, did a press conference over the weekend, and really tried to sell you on this whole idea of, well, man, what about the coronas?
Let's just take Super Bowl Sunday, okay? It's going to affect beer. Okay? Most of it, Corona here, comes from Mexico. It's going to affect your guac. Because what is guacamole made of? Avocados, both from Mexico.
You know what? I wasn't going to be drinking Corona when I'm watching the Chiefs on Sunday anyway. All right? I'm going to have my Coors Lights lined up. I'm just saying. That's me. John will have a couple of KC Beer Co's. And what are you going to drink this weekend, Mark?
Yeah, the Arrow Reds from KC Beer Co. Pretty good. I've had that.
Okay.
Cheese dip instead of guac. Yeah, that works.
Yeah, you'll be okay there, Chuck. And who wants to tell Chuck, because we know how he grills his burger, he puts the cheese on the ungrilled burger. Should we teach him how to make a little guacamole that he's got to, take the avocado and scoop it out before he starts smashing it? He can't smash the whole thing.
I just feel like he was looking down, and these were visual aids he had no personal reference to. Yeah, and here's most of this beer here, or whatever he said.
He's holding it.
And guac. Oh, it's an avocado, Chuck. Not guac yet.
He's holding it like a guy who's never had either of those things, right? Yeah. So relatable. So relatable, that Chuck Schumer.